evening to you. Welcome to the Neil Oliver Show with me, Bev Turner, tonight while Neil's on his holidays. We are, of course, on TV, radio and online. Now, I'm sorry about the red. I didn't get the memo. If I look like a disembodied head, I'm ever so sorry. Tonight, though, it's been a terrifying week, if you believe in free speech. One man's charges for social media posts included the reference to his anti-establishment rhetoric. I'm not joking. We're going to be asking a leading barrister what all of this might mean. The boxer at the centre of the Olympic gender controversy is suing Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling for aggravated cyber harassment. What chance does Emain Khalif have of winning that? And it's now called Mpox, not monkeypox, presumably because we didn't take it seriously enough when they tried that last year. The World Health Organization has declared Mpox a major global emergency, and the first cases have now been found in Europe. I'll be asking an expert if it's just another infection with a powerful marketing campaign. And finally, we're going to be catching up with the Australian Olympic breakdancing story, which is still spinning across the world. All of that and more coming up. But first, an update on the latest news. So, over the last couple of weeks, since the slaughter of 3 little girls at a Southport dance class, Great Britain has experienced a dizzying transformation into a frightened society in which the spoken or written word can land an otherwise blameless person in prison. Powerful, dissident voices, predominantly on the political right, have grown noticeably quiet on Twitter and Facebook, frightened by headlines of ordinary people being banged up for a hasty tweet or an expression of anger online. And it is this silencing which is precisely what Starmer and his Blairite acolytes want. Of course, free speech is complex, and the law has normally wrapped itself around the issue largely satisfactorily, until now. The example often used is whether you should be allowed to shout fire in a crowded room. Some say no. I say yes, because people aren't stupid, and they will use their other senses and awareness of heat or smoke to decide if they are in danger. But underpinning so much of the rhetoric of the last 2 weeks is the idea that British people are stupid and cannot be trusted to type words online in case they make other people do stupid things. Labour MP Jess Phillips largely kicked this off this week when a gathering of Muslim men amassed in her Birmingham constituency, and she tweeted, "All day rumours have been spread that a far-right group were coming, and it was done entirely to get Muslim people out on the street. It is misinformation being spread to create trouble." Now, these local louts eventually ragged their boy racer cars and their Palestinian flags around a roundabout, caused frightened pubgoers to barricade the doors, and eventually beat up a customer in the pub car park. Phillips could have tweeted, "Take responsibility for your own actions, regardless of whether you feel goaded online. Don't come out looking for trouble." But that isn't fashionable anymore. Gone are the days of telling people to take control of their own lives. We're now under a Labour government where you can look for the state to pay for your life and blame someone else when you inexplicably find yourself in a riot. Prince Harry waded in and blamed the internet for the post-Southport riots. "What happens online within a matter of minutes transfers to the streets," he said. "People are acting on information that isn't true." As though people were sat at home watching TV with a cuppa until they are gripped like a zombie by a tweet and decide to smash in the window at Greg's. It is patronising nonsense. And Harry's idea that this is because information isn't true contains the assumption that if controversial facts about an aggressor or a situation are true, that would make rioting somehow okay. It is bonkers. We need to stop blaming everything on social media. It is lazy, it is thick, and it's leading us towards accepting a closed society in which the narrative is dictated entirely by the state in collaboration with a compliant media. And the individual, you and me, are reduced to a passive, silent, stupid object who can't be trusted to think properly. Social media terrifies politicians and newspaper editors because it gives us, the little people, the ability to exchange information. In a world where 5 billion people use social media every day, some of it will be inaccurate, just like some things in newspapers have been inaccurate for decades. But democracies rely on the ability to exchange opinions and information. We need to tell our conflicting stories so that we continue to evolve into the 21st century rather than retreat into a weak, ineffectual tyranny of silence. So joining me now is Francis Hoare, public law barrister. Francis, good to see you. I've just been talking about how I find it quite terrifying the last couple of weeks, and the very firm fist with which Keir Starmer has been stamping out. It almost feels like quite personal to him in his role of former Director of Public Prosecutions. He seems to be very much involved in these cases to stamp out dissent, particularly on the right. How has it appeared to you from your legal perspective?
Well, I think there are two elements, Bev, and afternoon, it's good to see you. The first is the riots, the actual riots themselves, punishing those who have rioted, and use the word in a non-legal sense necessarily. I mean, public disorder in general terms, and also, which is, I think, connected to this, the social media, which was directly encouraging riots. For example, tweets saying, "Get out on the streets, boys, and burn down the hotel." Those will always be punished severely and quickly if people plead guilty, as those who've been punished have done. That's not new. It goes back to as long as the courts have been operating, and it is necessary to have a very quick reaction that stops public disorder. It happened in 2011, and it's happened now, and it happened times in the past. That's one thing. Questions will and can and should be raised about the proportionality and the extent of the sentences in due course. I'm not going to comment on those in detail, but that's not what I'm here to do. But the other concerning element has been the use of the Public Safety Act and as you say, the messaging by the government, and also the suggestion by the government, which they knew would be picked up by the media, about intelligence, what might be intelligence or might not be, but we have absolutely no way of knowing. For example, saying there are going to be 100 riots on the streets tomorrow. I'm sceptical, and I say that having spoken to a number of people who might know about this. I can't say more than that, but I'm very sceptical about the truth of that. And I know that this comes from a government machine, and I say government machine because, of course, it predates the new government, a government machine that has experience in the last few years, as we both know, and many others, of nudging people, of setting out messages that are not necessarily true, or certainly bending the truth in the way that they want to do so to manage people's behaviour.
So just to explain, because people may not know what you're referencing there. So this was the Telegram group. So Telegram is another social media app where people can exchange information. And on that Telegram group appeared a suggestion that on the Wednesday night of last week, there were going to be 100 organised riots. And that was then used as the catalyst for all of that build-up of tension on that particular day. There's going to be 100 riots, going to be 100 riots. As it turned out, there wasn't. I, for one, didn't think there was going to be at all. I don't think there are that many people who are sat at home who want to go out and smash in police windows with a piece of 4x2. I just wasn't reading the mood of the nation like that. So is your suggestion, Francis, therefore, that there could be, because we know that the organisation exists, the disinformation government unit, that they might have been some tinkering behind the scenes to provoke public discord?
Well, it's very difficult. The problem is it's impossible to know, and we can't know, we won't know for some time, but we should do. And obviously there's good reason for some government departments to be clouded in secrecy. And we don't know, for example, the number of terrorist attacks that MI5 foiled. And there's good reason for that. But is there a good reason for there to be privacy and absolute government privacy about communications on Telegram that may or may not have been true, or the government? No, I don't think so. So I think in due course we should find out about that, and then we'll be in a better position to comment. But it did seem to me, and as I say, I can say no more. It seemed surprising that this message was put out and was picked by so many media organisations. And I understand, if I recall the chronology correctly, I'll be correct if I'm wrong, but I understand that was the day before there were lots of anti-riots, and some of those anti-riots were mostly, they were in good order, but there was some public disorder on some of those as well. So yes, as you say, it does fit with a sort of government narrative. At the same time, as I said at the outset, I absolutely accept the authorities need to clamp down on public disorder very hard and very fast to avoid it spreading, as it did in 2011. And this didn't spread as much as it did in 2011.
The Crown Prosecution Service, Francis, have been... it's no exaggeration to say bragging on X, formerly Twitter, genuinely bragging about the number of people who have been arrested in the aftermath of the disruption that we saw in the last couple of weeks. That feels unprecedented to me, and that feels like a very strong message being sent out to the country, which is just be careful what you say on social media, and maybe there is some logic, a little logic to that. Be careful what you say on social media, because look at this example of this young lad. I mean, we've had, this idea of there was a Lincolnshire man, as I say, who was charged under information against the state. I think, anti-establishment rhetoric. That was the phrase, forgive me, anti-establishment rhetoric. That's surely unprecedented in this country.
I don't know about that, whether it's unprecedented or not. But what I will say firstly is that it is not unprecedented, but it is quite new for the CPS to have a major media presence and to be making statements. What I saw also, and I was concerned about, was the Attorney General congratulating himself effectively on social media using the official AG Twitter website, saying, I have approved the charging of individuals who have pleaded guilty. So to be clear, he wasn't putting in jeopardy the fairness of their trial. But it seems totally inappropriate to me, and if not unprecedented until recent times, for law officers to boast about what they are doing for public disorder. That is for the Home Secretary. It's perfectly acceptable for the Home Secretary and the Home Office ministers to give rhetoric about being tough on law and order. That's what they're there for. They are political, but the law officers are not, and the CPS are not, and they should not be. And another part of this is the police. I personally understand why the police need to communicate, but I personally would be very happy if much of their communications of the police ended immediately, because a lot of it is simply, as you say, bragging about their successful scalps. So yes, okay, a police Twitter presence is extremely important to say, we've got an unknown perpetrator, so we're looking for somebody, fine. Of course, that's important. But a lot of what the chief constables do and what they authorise is totally wrong in my view. So that's one element, but that does absolutely feed into this government message and this managed message of a particular response that is fine from the Home Secretary. Fine, absolutely no problem. And for the Prime Minister, that's what they're politicians. But what they shouldn't be doing is using neutral agencies to spread this message. And I do not think it's appropriate for the CPS to be saying, if you do X and Y, you will get Z. That again is for the Home Secretary to say, but the CPS are a neutral, disinterested, in the correct meaning of the word, public prosecutor. They don't have an interest in people being convicted. They are putting forward. I used to prosecute. I did when I did crime, and I was a Minister of Justice. And inculcated in the bar is this sense with a small m. You have a duty to put forward the case in a neutral, fair-minded way. You're not aiming for a conviction. You're aiming to ensure that the jury or the magistrates are in a position to do it. Sending out these messages, even if it is after pleas of guilty and even if it is after convictions, I don't think sends out the right message. And I think it's wholly wrong for these neutral public agencies to do that.
Because it can only be about weaponising fear against the British public. Francis Hoare, good to see you, as always. Thank you so much for your insight. Now, after the break, she won gold at the Olympics, but Emaine Khalifa is now taking on Elon Musk. You're watching The Neil Oliver Show with me, Bev Turner, on GB News. Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live with me, Bev Turner, this evening. Now, the boxer at the centre of the Olympics gender row has launched legal action against Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling for alleged aggravated cyber harassment. Emaine Khalif won gold in Paris, of course, in the women's boxing, despite allegedly having XY chromosomes, which means that effectively they were born male and have some male physical traits. Well, joining us now is discrimination lawyer Robin Moira-White. Good afternoon, Robin. Good to see you. Right. This was a huge controversy during the Olympics because it was sort of obvious that Emaine Khalif didn't look entirely female-born, let's say. She is not transgender. She considers herself to be a woman. She was raised as a girl. So what do you make of the fact that she's now looking to take legal action against the likes of Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling and also Donald Trump? Because online, they made comments to suggest that she shouldn't be fighting against women. Just tell me what you make of the whole thing.
I think from her perspective, she was called she was called a man, she was called transgender, but amongst other things, she was called a cheat. Now, some people might think that the rules of communication aren't right to be looked at, and almost certainly need to be looked at in good time for the 2028 Los Angeles Games. But Emaine Khalif and her national association followed the rules. And I think with some dignity, she didn't engage with awful treatment of her as an individual on social media. And whatever we think about the rights and wrongs of a particular circumstance, tearing up someone's life in public like that is a very cruel thing to do. Now, French law takes a dim view of that.
Yeah, and did France take a dimmer view of that than, say, the UK or America would? I was interested to learn that they have a department, an office for the fight against crimes against humanity and hate crime. So by that title, they do take this thing more seriously than perhaps the UK or America.
Yes, let me just sound a tiny note of caution. Plainly, I'm an England and Wales lawyer, not a French lawyer. And thank you to Hector, the avocat de procès, who spent 10 minutes this afternoon educating me on French law. But in French defamation, they have criminal defamation. Not just in England, it's just a civil claim that you would make. But it can be a criminal claim, and it can lead to criminal convictions, fines, and imprisonment in France. You might remember that there was in the trans area, there had been some suggestion that the First Lady in France was trans, and has resorted to law in terms of the people who've been spreading that particular story. So the French state takes a slightly different view to perhaps the Anglo-Saxon jurisdictions.
If this does go to court, Robin, will Emaine Khalif have to reveal anything about her chromosomal abnormalities, let's say, or her gender? Because at the moment, that information is private medical knowledge, and I think quite rightly it should remain private. Would that be brought into this in any way by lawyers maybe acting on behalf of the likes of J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk?
Well, it may be, but there also are mechanisms for protecting people's privacy if immensely private matters have to be dealt with. And my understanding is that the accused may face some difficulties. For example, where they've used the word cheat, they would have to show that there was some breach of the law. Where they've described Emaine Khalif in a particular way, they may have to show that they have justification for describing her in a particular way. And so I think it might be their difficulty rather than Emaine's.
Do you think that somehow this has, because initially there was speculation that Emaine was transgender, that she had been born male, had somehow deliberately transitioned or kind of said that she's a man in order to win the boxing. And it became this sort of maelstrom, didn't it, of effectively a misinformation around that particular issue. But do you understand why that's happened, why this conversation has become so inflammatory, particularly when you tie it to sport with women competing against biologically born men?
Yeah, I'm afraid I think some people weaponise the position related to the particular individual. Now, I'm sure the IOC's been in a very difficult position because it obviously had to stand the International Boxing Association aside after all the corruption allegations that there were related to the IBA. So the IOC has had to stand in, a bit like a government department taking over a failing rail company, for example. So they faced a difficult situation. Whether they handled it particularly well, people might have different views. Back to, I think my principal comment is, whatever your views about this, there are individuals, real people involved. And to be in a situation where those real people are having their lives pulled apart very publicly on social media has to be the wrong place for that.
The argument, of course, would be, and this is what people were saying on social media, is that Emain Khalif knows that they have a physiological advantage by being born with XY chromosome. So, and correct me if you have a different understanding of this, Robin, but my understanding is that, therefore, in utero, their genitalia has developed to appear female, but they won't have a uterus, they won't have ovaries, they'll have probably undescended testicles in this sort of biological situation, physiological makeup. And therefore, she has a choice to take advantage of that physical benefit, which she does in the boxing ring, or to say, this isn't a space that I should occupy because I will have that physical advantage. That's the criticism that's levelled against Emain Khalif.
Sure, and I don't have the level of understanding of what her understanding at particular times was, what her history has been, how she has understood herself from time to time, what advice she's had. I think that's the problem about, I was misled at an early stage. I thought inevitably there's one of the differences of sexual development is called Swire syndrome.
Yeah.
And I had understood that someone had clearly said that that's the difference of sexual development that she had. Actually, I don't know. You don't know.
Yeah.
Virtually all the people commenting don't know. And therefore, I'm afraid the finger points back at the sporting authorities to have managed this in an appropriate way that deals with the proper concerns that there are, that women's sport is protected, but that people who are on the fringes of maleness or femaleness are treated with humanity and respect.
I appreciate that you're not a French lawyer, and this is pretty specific, but from what you do know, what chances do you think she has of being successful against these very high-profile people, and maybe seeing them behind bars?
The French defamation laws are strict and strong, and allows the little person to win on occasion against the strong and the mighty. And that's what we would hope laws would allow people to do. If people however rich they are, however powerful they are, if they've transgressed, then the little man or woman should have a right to redress. And the French system does seem to offer that.
Yeah, well, it will be fascinating to watch. Thank you so much for your insight, discrimination lawyer Robin Moira White there. Right.
Adieu.
Thank you. Au revoir. Right, don't go away, because coming up next is Professor Hugh Pennington. There is apparently an Mpox outbreak. You can't call it monkeypox anymore. That was apparently too funny for you to take it seriously. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. Good evening, welcome back to Neil Oliver. It's me, Bev Turner, tonight. Bit like Neil, similar hair, similar views. Thank you for joining us. So the World Health Organization has declared a fresh outbreak of Mpox. It's had a rebranding, formerly known as Monkeypox. Apparently it's a global emergency. There have been almost 15,000 cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There have been more than 500 people have lost their lives to monkeypox. And the variant has apparently now hit Europe, with Sweden recording one case. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has said the potential for further spread within Africa is beyond is very worrying. He said a coordinated international response is essential to stop this outbreak and save lives. Now, I'm joined by Professor Hugh Pennington. Good evening, Professor Hugh. Thank you, Professor Pennington. Thank you so much for joining me. Right. I'm being a little sceptical about how much we should be panicking about this Mpox spread. How serious is it normally in Africa? As we've heard, there's been 15,000 cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo. How does that compare to a typical year? Do you know?
I don't really know, because we don't bother to measure it, particularly in countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is one of the poorest countries in the world. And we know that Mpox has been around there for many, many years. And it actually occurs in wild animals, and you can catch it by eating sort of bushmeat, although that's not been mentioned in the context of this particular outbreak. It also occurs in West Africa, and that's important because there are two different kinds of Mpox. There's the one that's causing the difficulties in the DRC for let's call it, rather than Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. And then in West Africa, it's a milder version. And that was the version that got out into men who have sex with men. And that was the way the virus was transmitted. And there was quite a big outbreak. Very, very few serious cases, because the West African one, the one that got basically spread worldwide, is a much milder version than the one that normally occurs in the DRC. And what's happened in the DRC, that it seems to have taken off, and there's some evidence that there's a new sort of variant which is related to the one that normally occurs there. Now, and also that's also spread by sexual contact. You have to have pretty close contact to catch monkeypox, a bit like smallpox in a way. And fortunately, just like we have a vaccine, the smallpox vaccine works against Mpox. So I don't think panic is in order at all. And even if we got cases in the UK, I think they could be coped with basically by isolating the cases and vaccinating the carers who look after these people and family members as well. And you can even be vaccinated after you've been exposed, which gives you reasonable protection. So it's something that one has to look at very carefully. It's bad news for the DRC because the virus does seem to have taken off. And unfortunately, the deaths that occur there, well, there's nothing new about that. What's new is the number of deaths. It really goes for young children. And it also goes for people who have immune systems that aren't very healthy either. Right. And of course, they have a fair amount of it. HIV would be a problem.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because we tend not to eat a lot of bushmeat here in the UK. Last time I was down the supermarket, I didn't see the bushmeat aisle. And I suppose unless you are like you say, a gay man who might have multiple relationships, then all of us are at very, very low risk of contracting this. So do you share some of my scepticism that as soon as something is labelled as an emergency or a pandemic by the World Health Organization, there are lots of people who are ready to receive billions of pounds in all sorts of convergent benefits which might occur under this label, and that really we should just not panic about this at this time?
I don't think we should panic in the UK. I think even if we imported cases, right? There's been one case reported in Sweden of somebody who'd been to Africa and undoubtedly caught it there. And that's the situation that one would have to watch out for in the UK, that people have been Well, I don't think many people go on holiday to the DRC, but there will be people who go there for other reasons. And they're the people that have to watch out if they get this spotty illness and so on. Clearly, they have to get not just medical advice. And there are some drugs that do work, no, not terribly well, but get themselves vaccinated, get their contacts vaccinated. And we have a pretty good system in the UK for sorting it out. I think one has to obviously bear in mind that COVID, took off and surprised everybody, and that's raised our level of awareness of these nasty viruses that occur in the tropics and so on. And I suppose it's done the same at the World Health Organization. It's raised their sort of, level of talk about these things. It's a problem that I think the problem really, if it's going to be sorted out at all, is going to be sorted out in the DRC and the countries around about where there's some people have taken it to geographically close countries. But I don't think, apart from people who go to the DRC either on business or on holiday, should be advised very carefully about what they should do when they're there and what they should do if they fall ill. I don't think in the UK we should be worried about it at all.
And just tell us what the symptoms are, because again, alongside some of this, what feels a little bit like fear-mongering messaging about monkeypox, presumably they've got a load of vaccines stockpiled because we didn't quite buy into it in the way that maybe some drug companies wanted us to a year ago. What are the symptoms? As you say, we're seeing these pictures of hideous, like, boils on people's faces, and it's pretty terrifying kind of imagery if you're susceptible to that kind of thing.
Yes, the main symptoms of Mpox are you feel absolutely rotten, you probably have a fever, and the characteristic ones, the ones on which the diagnosis would be made clinically, would be the spots, which are, as we've already heard, horrible-looking boil-like lesions which occur across the body, probably in some parts of the body more than in others. But that's the actual characteristic sort of symptom of it. Really, very, very much like smallpox. And in the olden days, long before smallpox was eradicated, monkeypox went unnoticed because the visual symptoms were so similar, you can't really tell them apart. And even if you look inside the pox, as we call them, and look for the virus, you can do it in an electron microscope. It would look exactly the same. The symptoms are just like smallpox, much less lethal than smallpox. Smallpox used to kill, well, there were two kinds of smallpox, just as there are two kinds of Mpox. But the severe kind of smallpox killed 20%, and this virus, the Mpox, is much less dangerous than that, particularly the West African one, rather than the one that occurs in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
OK, fascinating. Thank you so much, Professor Hugh Pennington. Well, take from that what you will. Right, after the break. What is going on here? Australian breakdancer Rachel Gunn has gone viral, of course, online following her performance at the Olympics. This is one of my favourite images. Somebody's made her into their windscreen wipers on the back of her car. We're going to be working out what is happening with this poor woman. She's now hit back, and this story is not going away. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Neil Oliver Show with me, Bev Turner, this evening. So you can't have missed this story about the 36-year-old Australian breakdancer Rachel Gunn, known as Ray Gunn, who's become an absolute figure of fun after her Olympic performance scored 0 points from 9 judges.
Hi everyone, Ray Gunn here. I just want to start by thanking all the people who have supported me. I really appreciate the positivity, and I'm glad I was able to bring some joy into your lives. I didn't realise that would also open the door to so much hate, which has frankly been pretty devastating. I'd really like to ask the press to please stop harassing my family, my friends, the Australian breaking community and the broader street dance community.
So I'm joined now by online editor of The Spectator Australia, Alexandra Marshall. Alexandra, thank you for joining me. I don't know about you, but when I see the reaction to Rachel Gunn, I haven't really seen hate. I've seen a huge amount of satire. Comedy shows have been doing impressions of her. She's inspired a million memes. But have you seen hate? And is she right to use that word?
Hate is definitely not the correct word. There has been some questions asked, shall we say, about the inclusion of breakdancing. But not only that, but look, Stephen Bradbury was the last time that we had an Australian in the Olympics famous for not doing well. And he was, of course, the speed skater who was coming dead last until everyone else fell over and he won a gold medal. In this case, what we've got is someone who is an academic who has a PhD in breakdancing, scoring 0. So what it really is the clash of academia with merit and the real world. And so she has walked into a much larger conversation about our universities. And I think that's why she's getting more criticism than just funny memes.
So the idea being that she didn't deserve to be there, and somehow she'd got there and kind of somehow worked the selection process so that she was selected. Is she the best breakdancer there is in Australia?
Okay, look, if she was just a dodgy breakdancer, it would be a story for all the 5 minutes. What's happened is everyone in Australia has gone back and dug through her PhD essays and things on the topic. And I've actually got a quote here for you if you want me to read why people are laughing at it. I brought it up. So I went actually read part of this article. I'll never get that part of my life back. But she said, "We argue that breaking institutionalization via the Olympics will place breaking more firmly within this sport's nation's hegemonic settler colonial structures that rely upon racialized and gendered hierarchies." Total, utter nonsense. And that's where this sort of criticism is coming from, because like, you wrote this, and yet you can't break dance as well as the others.
So you mean, so she's like super woke, we might say. She's very much tied into identity politics, and yet she's used her. I mean, is she even a break dancer? I know that sounds like a stupid question, but looking at the moves, I reckon after a few gin and tonics on a Saturday night, I could master some of those. I like the kangaroo. I can do that one. Like, what, did she qualify?
Actually, the kangaroo is my favourite. The kangaroo is my favourite. That whole has been superimposed onto the Qantas plane tails as one of the memes. There's also like window wipers on cars going through, which is brilliant. But there have been all these people on TikTok and Instagram who are putting her breakdancing behind them and then just giving it a go and absolutely nailing it. So it has got this whole, you could be an Olympian too if you wanted to be vibe. None of this is hate. What it is mass criticism. And what I have a problem with is when these people go out there, they like all the social media praise, they want as much of that attention as possible. But when it's negative, suddenly it's bullying.
So you kind of get the feeling that maybe she's never really had anybody in her life who's just gone, do you know what, Rachel, just like maybe give it a miss, because this could have the potential for humiliation. She's lived in academia where actually it takes a lot of bravery to swim against the tide of opinion, it can seem sometimes in academic institutions. And maybe there was nobody there to tell her that she's going to have to grow a very, very thick kangaroo-like hide in order to cope with some of the it's sort of satire. It's taking the mickey out of her, we might say, and using it, but as a bit of a figure of fun, as I said in the intro.
Yeah, well, she's actually one of the most famous people in the world right now. A lot of people who work very hard in the media and very hard in comedy are hideously jealous of her for being the funniest thing around in basically 10 years. So she should be proud of herself in that respect. Look, if she had just taken it in the good humour that it was intended, this story would have been over in 5 minutes. As I say, this is a larger story about academia, and I'm sure you've got the problem with academia as well over there, where there are serious questions being being asked about how we spend our public money in universities and whether or not some of these degrees are competing against things like the hard sciences that need to be put forward. We've got all of our kids, their education is sliding back behind parts of the third world. And then you've got this Olympic thing meets it and everyone just goes, see, this is what we mean by merit versus academia. And so I think it really is basically just that conversation. She was the catalyst for it.
Well, have there been Australian breakdancers on the news outlets there saying that should have been me? Because that's the part of this story that baffles me.
I think it might be a bit like the snowboarders in the Winter Olympics story and the skateboarders, including in the Olympic story, where I'm sure there are a huge amount of extremely talented, highly qualified people that might not pass a drug test in these kinds of sports. So it's a bit of a new sport. It's a bit of a fringe activity that has connections to other walks of life, shall we say. And so maybe it's just some teething issues with the sport, but I think they've nixed it now, so we may never know.
Yeah, they've ditched it. They've actually ditched it from the next Olympics. And is that partly because of this controversy, because it wasn't taken seriously, do you think? Do you know? I mean, that might not be your area of specialism, Alexandra, as to which sports make it into the Olympics.
Look, I'm not going to claim any special knowledge of breakdancing, but I do think that the Olympics had a lot of criticism levelled at it, although I do believe that the boxers in the women's boxing was a far bigger controversy. So almost instead of going and dealing with that problem, which is serious, they probably went, well, just deal with the breakdancing problem because that's pretty easy to handle and get rid of. But, the Olympics was a car crash from beginning to end. Let's not pretend it was otherwise. So I'm not surprised. I'm actually a bit sad because the really, really good breakdancers, if you watch the more of them, they almost do deserve to be there. That stuff is hard and it's fun to watch. They're a bit like the gymnasts, but maybe not Australia's attempt. I will own up to that.
It makes me very nostalgic for the year 2000 and the Sydney Olympics, when the world was a much more simple place and it was all about higher, faster, stronger, the Olympic principles of just being amazing at doing what you can do in your human body. Thank you so much. So thank you for letting me be Neil Oliver for this evening. That's it on the telly, but if you want more of us, we of course will be on YouTube, and stay tuned for the brilliant Free Speech Nation next. I'm going to carry on this conversation. We're going to be talking more about free speech and the astonishing debanking scandal that is continuing. So I'll see you back live on GB News Monday morning at 9:30 for Britain's Newsroom. But otherwise, come and see me over on YouTube. See you soon. Welcome back to the Neil Oliver Show with me, Bev Turner. So it's only 6 weeks into this new Labour government, and the talk that shows no sign of going away is that Labour are going hard on free speech. Should we be worried? Their honeymoon period is well and truly over. Right, I'm joined now by Arabella Skinner from Us For Them. Arabella, good to see you. Thank you for joining me. So just to explain to people, just remind people who Us For Them are and why you are concerned about the ability to speak freely, particularly online.
Yes, thanks, Bev. Us For Them are a children's campaign group. We came to life during the pandemic through thousands and thousands of parents getting in touch and being concerned about what was happening with children. And we challenged and questioned where children were in policy making and what the issues were around children. And we're particularly concerned around this whole area of censorship because, like many other people who questioned things, even when they were talking in completely, please put children forward, we found ourselves under censorship. And we've written a book called The Accountability Deficit, where we looked at this in much more detail. And we looked at the Counter Disinformation Unit, which has just been renamed as the National Security Online Information Team and come to life again. And whilst it all sounds really sensible, doesn't it? And it's hard to disagree with that, we shouldn't have things that are disinformation. well, who decides what's disinformation? And how do you have a world where there's a core consensus and you can't question or challenge anything? And that's what we saw during the pandemic. And that's what we're seeing, the concern we're going to see now.
So people would be interested to hear you say that, Arabella, because they might think, oh, well, if you're an organisation that works on behalf of children and keeping the world safe for children, then surely you would be in favour of harmful content being taken off the internet. So just explain the subtlety that you've alluded to there.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting place. And we also run a campaign called Safe Screens. And one thing that we're very, very passionate about is the impact of smartphones on children. So I think we're in a really quite unique place because we can see the concerns around free speech and censorship in an adult world because it's impacted us. And we also see that indescribable harms that hit our children. And this is the irony of the situation, is that we have an online safety bill that really isn't going to solve issues for our children. It's not going to completely get rid of the problems that they're seeing. And the digital age of consent is currently 13. There's no plans to move that. That's ridiculous that a child of 13 can make certain decisions around it. It's not going to get rid of all the high level harmful content, but it's also not going to get rid of the harm of the addictive nature of a smartphone and all the other issues that come around screens and attention and all those problems around it. So you're going to end up in a world where we go hardcore on censorship and not letting people speak or challenge or question, and whoever, we have all these people like the Global Disinformation Index who decide what's disinformation. And yet we're going to have a world where our children who need protection aren't going to be protected, which just seems absolute madness. And you can,
No. I was just going to say, I think there's a phrase that just keeps coming to mind at the moment to me, which is that we're treating adults like children and we're treating children like adults. And that inversion, Arabella, for me, is what will store up all the problems of the future. Do you feel it's worse under this Labour government? We've had Bridget Phillipson saying this week as well that they want to empower teachers to teach children how to spot, I think it was putrid conspiracy theories is what she said. Now, in my opinion, what's the difference between a conspiracy theory and fact? About 6 to 12 months is what the last 4 years has taught me. So it's like they're trying to catch sand in their fingers in terms of truth. There is no one source of truth. Chilling to me was the former New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, during the pandemic, who said, we will be your one source of truth. Now, that is communism. That is East Germany in the 1970s, 80s. That is the Soviet Union. And yet we've got Western leaders who currently seem very comfortable telling us, come to me for your information. What are they frightened of in terms of the social media space?
Well, I think, ironically, it is exactly what Bridget Phillipson is talking about. She wants to teach our children critical thinking. I just don't think they activate their critical thinking and they don't think through the long-term impact of what they're actually saying. Because you go, well, disinformation, we don't want disinformation, but great examples during the pandemic, this Global Disinformation Index, and there was a massive investigation, I think, by Unheard, who looked at this because they were caught up in it. And they were being funded by the Foreign Office at one point. And this is a group who started out life saying, yes, we're just looking at disinformation. By 2021, they were actually taking down documents that included the government statistics. Yeah. So the founder stood up in a talk and said, this is appalling that we've told people not to advertise on this particular website because they said that a certain percentage of people who were vaccinated caught COVID. That's clearly a lie. Well, that data came from the ONS. So when they're making fundamental errors like that, and other things that we know that it was considered a conspiracy theory for anyone to talk about COVID being in a lab, and now that's considered a very, very possible outcome. Yeah. So it's I think it's a lack of thought of the fact there is no fundamental rules, and you also have to question that, are we looking at a very short-termist? It seems easier to sort out the internet, it's not, than sort out whatever the underlying causes of the riots. And there's two things that worry me hugely. One is the lack of censorship, and the other thing is actually thinking about what the underlying cause is, because that's going to cause problems for our children.
And it's just too easy to just sorry everybody, we're out of time, but it's just too easy to say blame the internet, because it takes a lot more thinking than that. Luckily, there's people like you at Us For Them who are doing some of the hard work and the hard thinking that, frankly, we should all do a bit more of. Arabella Skinner, thank you so much for joining me. Next, we're going to be talking to somebody about the debanking scandal. It has not gone away. If anything, it is continuing apace. Don't go anywhere. This is the Neil Oliver Show with me, Bev Turner, this evening. So, you'll have all heard about the debanking scandal. Of course, Nigel Farage brought it to prominence. But the NatWest group have now come under scrutiny, as many customers have reportedly had their accounts closed with no warning or explanation. A Facebook group has been created by the people affected by this banking error. And I'm joined now by Yulia Komic. Yulia, have I got your name right? Correct me if I've got that wrong.
Yes, it's right.
Yeah. OK. How many people are now on this Facebook group who've all been affected by this banking scandal?
It's approximately 11,000 people in that group who has got the same problem like me.
11,000 people. OK, that's a huge number. You'd think it might be the kind of story that would be on the front page of all the papers. So it isn't. A lot of people don't seem to be getting this story heard. Tell us exactly what happened to you.
Yes, what's happened with me, I've just started my own company as a solo trader, and I received second payment from the customer, and it was amount approximately £11,000. And bank just blocked my account, and within 2 days, my account has been deleted without any explanation. And it's happened 2 months ago, and I still don't have any explanation, and my funds hasn't been released.
Ask you what your business is. It's presumably not sort of human trafficking or drug dealing. What made their alarm bells go off?
No, my customer paid for the fireplaces, and I have the same company in Ukraine. So I just create this company here in the UK, and it's happened with me, and I can't proceed my orders and can't complete order for my customers because the money has been blocked.
So, OK, so you sell fireplaces. Did you have, so just to clarify, you had this business in Ukraine, you've moved to the UK and you want to carry on your trade. Did NatWest ask any questions when you opened the account about the nature of the business or whether you would have international payments they might find problematic?
No, they didn't have any questions because even after first payment, it was everything okay. But after the second payment, I just received notification. We don't want to have any relationship with you anymore. And we want to close your account. And it will not be anything for discussion. And they said to me, we can't explain anything and we will not explain anything to you.
So they must have given you your £11,000 balance back from the account. Did they say to you, where would you like us to transfer this money to?
I received the application form within 6 days. I filled this application form 60 days ago, but I still don't have my money back. And every time when I try to ask, please explain for me where I will receive my money back, they just answered to me, we have rights to investigate this case, and we're still investigating this case. So you can receive your money during 60 days, but in specific situation, it can be even longer.
60 days, not less than a week, not 6, 2 whole months, and you haven't had your money back and you haven't had an explanation. Do they give you one person to talk to deal with this? We've all had that frustration of being held on chatbots and talking to people at banks when you can't get any sense. You would think in such a serious situation, they give you one person to deal with.
Yes, they provide for me a contact. It was Kevin, but unfortunately, he didn't contact me at all. So every time I should message him and ask him what's going on, and he just answered to me in a standard answer that you should wait and it's under investigation and I don't have any news. But also he provided for me, like you can have or make a complaint to Financial Ombudsman Service. And I've made it, but unfortunately, when I called last time, 2 days ago, to Financial Ombudsman Service, they just sent me to the bank, and bank sent me again to the Financial Ombudsman Service.
It's the stuff of nightmares. Now, fortunately, clearly, when I say you don't need this money, it's your money. You should have it. You might need it. But there will be people who need the money in their bank account to literally pay their rent and feed their children. Do you know of situations like that where their funds have just been cut off?
Yes, I know a lot of situations from the Facebook when people stay with NatWest more than 20 or 30 years and they have savings like 60K, 70K, 120,000K, and they still can't release their funds after 8 months, 1 year. And I think they have even bigger problems than me.
And when you're swapping information about your stories on Facebook, when you're talking to each other, what would you describe the emotion of those people in that group?
I can say when it's happened with me, I feel the same stress when war happened in Ukraine. So I'm constantly in immense stress. And my first 2 weeks, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep because I have responsibility before my customer. And I still can't complete this order for my second customer. And especially for me, it's important to start company here because here I have new life. And I want to become successful as well, like in Ukraine. And for other people, each case has got different circumstances. And I understand everyone just in a difficult situation and want to receive their money back as soon as possible.
Do you feel that anybody is helping you, Lulia? Have you contacted the MP in the area where you are, or Citizens Advice Bureau, or lawyers?
Yes, I've contacted MP, I've contacted Citizen Advisor, I've contacted Financial Ombudsman Service. I've made a complaint 1st of July. Now it's 45 days from my complaint to Financial Service, but I still don't have any information. And Financial Service said to me, when we've contacted NatWest Bank, NatWest Bank said to us, we need more time to investigate this case. Please come back to us in the end of the August. So in the end of the August, it will be 3 months from date which they blocked my account and frozen my money.
Can you open a new account with a different bank and then just carry on your business like that and then pursue the money separately?
I think I have some flags because unfortunately I can open account. I open account in HSBC Bank, but just personal account. And when I tried to open business account, they said to me, for right now, we can't offer to you business account.
Because presumably your name is on a list.
Yes, I think it's I think it's a red flag.
Wow.
And I understand that I will not be able to open new account in any bank just because until the situation will resolve.
Okay, well, Lulia, thank you so much for telling us your story. As you say, you're one of 11,000 people that have joined that Facebook group to share their stories. So I wish you all the best with it, and I'd like you know, to come on Britain's Newsroom that I normally present during the week on GB News and tell us about it, and let's see what we can do, because it seems like an absolute scandal. Thank you so much, Lulia Komic there. We contacted NatWest for a response, and a spokesman said, without written customer consent, we won't be able to comment on any individual customer case. Nothing like computer says no, is there? OK, you've been watching The Neil Oliver Show on GB News. Thank you to all of my guests. Neil will be back next week, and I'll be back on Britain's Newsroom Monday to Thursday on GB News 9:30 every weekday morning. See you then.